So this video is going to go over what Kamen Riders I think would make for a good American adaptation. Not if we even need an adaptation, because that is a whole other can of worms.
Marcosatsu.
Adaptations. I love them. You might not, but that's okay, because this is my channel. I've said before, I'm a huge fan of Power Rangers. I love the new adaptation ways that they tell new stories, have new casts. I just love how Power Rangers adapts from Super Sentai. Kamen Rider, unfortunately, has a very short but sad story when it comes to his adaptations. Saban's Masked Rider was a big failure on its own, and I will get into reasons why as we go into this video. And Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, I thought was actually really good, and it did capture a lot of the spirit of the original Kamen Rider, or at least Kamen Rider as a whole. Why Dragon Knight failed, I could only theorize between not being marketed as much since the last few episodes didn't even air on TV, or it was just, I guess, too ahead of its time. So I thought to myself, well, what Kamen Rider would I choose for an adaptation? And I want to have some logistics to it, because I don't know, I don't think I would choose an anniversary season like Geo or Decade, because you would have to introduce so many writers, and while that can be done, it might not be feasible for a small production, or maybe even just a medium-sized budget trying to get all these characters, all these actors, and all these suits together in an anniversary show like I said, Decade or Geo. Saban's Masked Rider tried to do that. They tried to incorporate some of Black RX's crossover motifs, but it was mostly through stock footage, as you can tell, since the budget was incredibly low. And it didn't work. They tried to voice over or dub over a lot of the original writers, but then you could see through the footage, they just named the wrong writers.
I am Rider Man. I am Masked Rider X. I am Amazon.
So with that, I'm thinking budget has to be in mind. What kind of restrictions they have. What they can even show or adapt or try to cover up when they try to film original scenes. And I think Dragon Knight did pretty well trying to combine Kamen Rider Ryuki footage with its own original footage. I want to say it was fairly obvious when Dragon Knight was trying to have its own original footage, juxtaposed with Ryuki's older, less quality kind of footage, but the locations were pretty good. I think the new locations in Dragon Knight were also pretty memorable in their own right. I mean, of course, it's not Ryuki, but Dragon Knight did have some pretty cool set pieces, some pretty cool scenes, combined with the cool fight scenes of Ryuki. So with that in mind, of course, we're gonna immediately knock out all of the Showa era. Even if Toei somehow had widescreen 6K, the original masters or the original footage of the Showa era, all the way from Ichigo to Kamen Rider J or Black RX, if you want to use that again. I just don't think the Showa era in terms of costumes and aesthetics would really fit in the modern day. And I don't think anyone would really argue with me on that. Even if you want to count the last of the Showa era being Black RX or the movies Kamen Rider J and Zeto and Shin, they still don't feel modern. I mean, I'm going to say this a lot. Things can work in theory if writers are good enough, but for the most part, you most likely are not going to use Kamen Rider J, Shin, Zeto footage in a 2023 and beyond production. So with that, I'm also going to knock out some early Heisei shows. Dragon Knight used Ryuki, which was years and years before Dragon Knight was even conceptualized, and Ryuki's footage did work well enough, but like I mentioned earlier, you could tell when the Ryuki footage was used because it was a bit grainier, it did look a bit older than what Dragon Knight was trying to do in the early 2010s, or a couple of years before the 2010s. And a lot of my thoughts when it comes to these early Heisei shows is that they do look older in aesthetic. And I want to say Power Rangers kind of has the same issue where some older footage they use, it looks old, it looks older, it doesn't look like it was filmed in the modern day. I want to say Megaforce had plenty of issues trying to combine the footage together, and it just didn't really work for me, but that was also Megaforce, so it could be an exception. But I think Dino Charge and Dino Fury also kind of looked a little off when they try to combine footage. So that would knock out, unfortunately, Kuga, Agito, Ryuki, Faiz, Blade, and Hibiki, sadly enough. At least to me, and the 3 other Hibiki fans out there. And around Kabuto was when high definition was actually being used by Toei, so they had brand new technology. And I do think some Kabuto footage holds up very, very well, but it does have that oldish charm to it. I hope it doesn't seem like I'm against the older stuff because like I said, I think Kabuto could work. I think Den-O could work also. But then you want to look at shows like Decade or Kiva, and if you try to put this footage next to like modern day footage, you know it would look off. Maybe little kids wouldn't care about that. But hey, that's just me trying to like work things out in my mind to see which writer I think would fit in terms of like trying to have a brand new adaptation for an American audience. Forze might seem like it would work because he looks like an astronaut and Meteor looks like he's from outer space, so you could have a lot of cool stories with that. And I think Lizard is another really good choice because strictly for the action, and the suit looks absolutely gorgeous. While I think something like Gaiman Drive might be a bit of a harder sell because I'm thinking it in a way where this would be like a brand new thing. Even though Masked Rider and Dragon Knight did come before and they do still exist in a way, having a brand new adaptation would most likely try to be away from all of that. I really doubt this new adaptation for Kamen Rider would have Saban or Adness Entertainment work their lore and story into it. But I think this new adaptation would really try to start fresh, would really try to introduce new things, totally ignoring what came before. Or for the most part. Kamen Rider Ghost would be cool, and X8, of course. You would think X8 would be a perfect adaptation since it has to do with video game. You can do so much with that. You can work around a lot of the footage, and there's even a lot of stock footage you could use from X8, and a lot of the fight scenes don't have characters in the background, so you could pretty much get away with X8. But that's where my other That's gonna be a blooper. But that's where my other issue comes in. If this is going to be a new adaptation, then it's going to be a groundwork. It's going to establish certain themings. And if this adaptation ends up being successful on whatever streaming service it's on, then people are going to start thinking that whatever comes after this X8 adaptation is going to be video game themed again. It's going to have similar themes for the characters and the story, and it's going to be revolving around these aesthetics for X8. When in reality, just like Power Rangers and Super Sentai, Kamen Rider just changes year by year. And that's the reason why Mighty Morphin stuck with the Zyuranger theme for its 3 seasons. The Mighty Morphin suits were what people were used to. And only after a couple of years, a few more years of having these brand new suits, and then later on just brand new teams and stories in general, did people get used to it and understand, oh, Power Rangers just changes everything from year to year. But this new Kamen Rider show would probably have to establish that it's not going to be video game themed forever. It's not going to be based on ghosts forever. It's not going to be based on cars and fruits forever. It's just for like this one season, and whatever happens after is most likely going to depend on the footage or whatever the writers decide to use for their story. And honestly, that's been my main issue in thinking of like the right Kamen Rider to adapt. Because whatever you choose to adapt is going to have a lot of groundwork for it. So the Reiwa era might actually be one of the best things to choose when going for an adaptation. But in the absolute genius move, Toei decided that if you want to get the rights for Kamen Rider, you have to buy them individually. Not Kamen Rider as a whole, individually. And that is going to make things much harder. That's why I'm saying budget has to like be considered for this, because you're probably going to spend millions and millions just to buy the rights alone. Not even like making the show, just the rights to, let's say, Kamen Rider Geats, which is most likely going to be the most expensive thing because for one, it's current, and for two, it's a popular season. And Toei knows what they're selling. So everything Reiwa 01 to Geats is going to be expensive, no matter what. But if you want to put money aside, I think 01 would be one of the best things to adapt. It does look basic enough, but cool enough to lay something out for a story. There's a lot of really good B-roll footage. There's a lot of good fight scenes that don't always show characters in the back, so you could use those action scenes. There's some really good toys to sell. If you want to focus just on the belts and then just have a couple gimmicks with it without focusing on more gimmicks, I think 01 could sell really well. The belt looks cool. I think a lot of the aesthetics in general look really cool. And if you do want to add in the gimmicks are really cool collectibles. And I don't even need to mention the more riders there are, the more merchandise there can be. So, hey, Zero One has a lot of riders. Maybe too many, but it does have a lot of riders to have plenty of merchandise for. And I think the same thing can be said about Saber. It does look cool. A lot of the action looks great. It has probably some of the most B-roll footage you can use for Kamen Rider. I think the books would be interesting enough for a child to use. Like, the books don't even have to open up. You probably could just cheapen out, just like Power Rangers did. Guess which one's the Japanese version? See that like this, the Japanese version actually has a button to open things, and this one that doesn't even work. So I think if the American toys wanted to cheap out on things, you could do that with like the Reiwa era gimmicks, whether it's the Vice stamps or the Progress keys or the books. Like I said, the books don't even have to open up. But as long as they work with the driver or like the main toy gimmick, then I think any of these Reiwa shows would be perfect for an adaptation. Although Geats would be more difficult to sell on for the toys because there are a lot of more mix and match gimmicks. But that's a different thing. Nah, never mind. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. So, with all that out of the way, with everything I set my mind on, budget, filming restrictions, and even a certain direction that these writers can take, what do I think would be the best choice for an adaptation for America? I've said this a few times already, but I think if there was ever an adaptation for Kamen Rider again, I think the perfect one would be, well, the one, Kamen Rider Build. Not only does the suit look amazing, and you can just imagine some little kid going to like Walmart or something and seeing this figure for like the Build adaptation, and they would most likely want it. I think a lot of Build works on its own. Like just not even as Kamen Rider, just Build works a lot on its own. It stands out on its own very, very well. And then you have all these gimmicks. You have multiple writers that could make for some really good story. And a lot of the filming locations are varied. And wherever the filming area is, whether it's in America or New Zealand, there are a lot of ways you can get around using Build footage. And if you want to go the Dragonite route to have some original footage, then I think Build could work off the original footage very, very well too. I personally just think there's so much footage in Build that could be used for a large variety of ways that you have more options or more choices. You can be more open to some kind of story where it goes with the characters or some kind of plot, so you go with Kamen Rider Build. It doesn't have to always be about aliens. In the same way that Build kind of did, because it also did a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of a mystery, it had some aliens in there was some political conflicts, so I think an adaptation could also do a little bit of everything and still be able to use a lot of the footage. You could probably say the same about Kamen Rider 01 and even Kamen Rider Double, but I think Build just has the perfect blend of being modern enough and cool enough that you could use for an American adaptation. And Build could be the perfect stepping off point, because if you really wanted to, you could also adapt the movie, the crossover, Heisei Generations Final, where it could also introduce more Kamen Riders, more of this world. It could have its own Masked Rider Warrior Leader moment if you really wanted to. And as Power Rangers made clear, you don't have to adapt the direct next season after Build. So if you adapt Build, you wouldn't have to go with Geo. You could even go backward. You could introduce X-Aid through the crossover. Even more so, you could use X-Aid as another stepping off point with its own Heisei Generations, introducing more of these heroes, more of these riders. And Geo, I think it's its own thing that I don't even want to think about adapting, because my small brain can't handle Geo on its own as it is. So, I personally think Kamen Rider Build would be the perfect adaptation in pretty much every aspect you can think of. Now, if you didn't have a budget and you just wanted to have your own Kamen Rider adaptation, just go 01.